Love should be a safe place. A space where the heart can rest, where the presence of another brings peace, comfort, and a sense of belonging. But for many people, love has stopped being a shelter and has turned into fear. Fear of speaking, fear of making mistakes, fear of causing silence, distance, or emotional outbursts. When love turns into fear, something very deep is wrong. At the beginning, it almost never seems dangerous. Fear arrives slowly, disguised as excessive care, as jealousy because they love too much, as control wrapped in beautiful words. Little by little, you start measuring every sentence, every action, every decision. What used to be spontaneous becomes calculated. You stop being yourself to avoid conflict. This kind of relationship does not hurt all at once. It erodes you gradually. You begin to doubt your own perception, questioning whether you are exaggerating, being too sensitive, or if the problem is you. And while trying to fix the relationship, you slowly disconnect from yourself. Fear settles into your body, your mind, your routine. When love turns into fear, the body gives signals. Constant anxiety, tightness in the chest, trouble sleeping, a permanent sense of alert. You feel tense even during the good moments because you know peace can disappear at any second. Loving becomes emotional surveillance. Perhaps the most painful part is realizing that you stay, trying to justify what cannot be justified, because there is still love or attachment, or hope that everything will return to how it was in the beginning. But love that hurts, silences, and paralyzes is not healthy love. It is a warning. And ignoring this warning can come at a very high emotional cost. Recognizing that love has turned into fear is not weakness. It is awareness. It is the first step toward reclaiming your voice, your dignity, and your right to live a relationship where love does not scare, threaten, or hurt. When love turns into fear, emotional confusion becomes constant. You feel that you love, but at the same time you feel threatened. There is affection, but it comes with tension. There is closeness, but it does not bring rest. And this creates a deep internal conflict. How can something that is supposed to feel good hurt so much? Often, fear does not come from explicit aggression, but from subtle behaviors. Disapproving looks, prolonged silence, sudden mood changes, words that seem small but leave deep marks. You learn to constantly read the environment, trying to predict reactions, avoiding triggers, reshaping yourself to prevent pain. Loving begins to require constant vigilance. Over time, you start to shrink emotionally. You avoid expressing opinions, desires, and feelings. You prefer to give in rather than argue. You choose silence over explanation. And without realizing it, you give up important parts of who you are. Fear stops being a temporary feeling and becomes a permanent state. This kind of relationship teaches you that love must be earned every day, as if it were always hanging by a thread. You feel the need to prove your worth, loyalty, and patience. Any mistake feels unforgivable. Any boundary you set brings guilt. Love stops being a mutual exchange and becomes a lonely effort. The cruelest part is that fear is often normalized. You start to believe this is just how love works. That every relationship hurts, that suffering is a sign of intensity. But this is a learned lie. Love does not demand that you live with a tight chest. Love does not ask you to erase yourself to keep someone by your side. When love turns into fear, the problem is not your sensitivity, it is the dynamic of the relationship. And recognizing this is essential to breaking the cycle of pain, confusion, and silence that traps so many people in relationships that hurt more than they heal. When love turns into fear, the impact is not limited to emotions. It spreads through the body, the mind, and the way you start to see life. Without realizing it, you enter a constant state of alert, as if you were always preparing for something to go wrong. The body reacts even before reason can fully understand what is happening. Anxiety becomes a daily presence. The heart races without an apparent reason, sleep becomes light or interrupted, and the mind never rests. You replay conversations, anticipate conflicts, imagine negative scenarios. Small gestures from the other person begin to generate tension because you never know what the reaction will be. Love stops being a refuge and becomes a source of stress. Emotionally, fear slowly erodes self-esteem. You start to believe that you need to change to be loved. That you must be less, ask for less, feel less. Gradually, you distance yourself from what you truly feel because expressing emotions seems dangerous. Silence becomes a survival strategy. The mind also learns to become confused. You rationalize behaviors that hurt you, minimize pain, create justifications for what should not be acceptable. All to keep the relationship going. But this effort comes at a high cost. You begin to lose clarity about your own boundaries. What once felt wrong now seems normal. Constant fear affects even how you relate to the world. You feel tired, disconnected, less confident. Pleasure diminishes, spontaneity disappears. You are physically present but emotionally distant, trying to protect yourself. When love turns into fear, the body and mind are asking for attention. These signs are not exaggeration or drama. They are legitimate responses to a relationship that creates insecurity. Ignoring them is ignoring yourself. Listening to them is the beginning of a path toward reconnection, awareness, and emotional care. When love turns into fear, leaving the relationship is not a simple decision. From the outside, it may seem obvious. For those living it from the inside, it is a tangle of emotions, memories, and expectations. There is the fear of losing, the fear of being alone, the fear of regret. And above all, there is the hope that everything can still change. The mind clings to good memories. Moments of affection, promises, times when everything seemed different. You convince yourself that this war the person stöks jetzt andert. With effort, it will return. This emotional attachment creates a cycle that is difficult to break. The pain is great, but hope speaks louder. At the same time, fear weakens self-confidence. After so much silence, giving in, and adapting, you no longer feel strong enough to leave. You doubt your ability to start over. You question whether you deserve something better. The relationship that hurts also silently convinces you that you would not survive without it. Many people stay because of guilt. Guilt for thinking about leaving, guilt for imagining the other person's pain, guilt for prioritizing their own emotional health. Leaving feels selfish when in fact it is self-preservation. Love should not require you to sacrifice yourself until you disappear. Another powerful factor is fear of the unknown. Even painful, the relationship is familiar. The suffering is already known. What comes next is uncertain. And the fear of emptiness, loneliness, or social judgment paralyzes you. You learn to endure what hurts because it feels less frightening than facing the new. When love turns into fear, staying is not a sign of weakness. It is a sign of how hard you tried. But remaining in a place that wounds you is not proof of love. Sometimes, the most loving act is choosing yourself, even with fear, even without all the answers. When love turns into fear, silence takes the place of truth. You stop saying what you feel, what you think, and what you need. Not because you lack feelings, but because you have learned that expressing them leads to conflict, distance, or emotional punishment. Fear teaches that speaking comes at a high cost. Little by little, you start adapting in order to survive. You change your tone of voice, choose words with excessive caution, avoid certain topics. Your needs are pushed into the background. What once mattered to you begins to feel like too much. You convince yourself that asking for respect, attention, or affection is asking for too much. This process of self-erasure is silent and deep. It does not happen overnight. It is built through small daily concessions, a boundary you stop enforcing, a pain you swallow, a truth you silence. And when you finally notice, you no longer recognize the person you have become within the relationship. Constant silence creates a feeling of invisibility. You are present, but you do not feel seen. You love, but you do not feel truly loved. There is companionship, but no connection. Fear creates an emotional distance that physical closeness cannot fill. Over time, you may begin to believe that this is the price of love. That relationships require constant sacrifice, that suffering is part of it. But love that requires you to disappear is not healthy love. It is a dynamic that consumes, weakens, and hurts. When love turns into fear, reclaiming your voice becomes essential. Speaking up, taking a stand, and recognizing your limits is not aggression, nor is it selfishness. It is care, it is dignity. It is the beginning of a path where you exist fully again, without having to shrink yourself to be accepted. When love turns into fear, what often keeps the relationship going is no longer love, but emotional dependency. The line between the two can be confusing, especially when you are already emotionally vulnerable. You believe you cannot live without the other person, that your happiness depends on the relationship, even though it hurts you. Emotional dependency makes the fear of losing greater than the fear of continuing to suffer. You endure situations that wound your dignity because the idea of being alone feels unbearable. The other person becomes your reference for value, security, and identity. Without them, you feel like you are nothing. Unlike healthy love, dependency does not bring growth. It traps. Love strengthens, dependency weakens. In love, there is freedom to be who you are. In dependency, there is constant fear of disappointing, of being abandoned, of not being enough. This type of bond creates the illusion that any crumb of affection is better than total absence. An apology, an occasional affectionate gesture, a promise of change begin to feel like proof of love. And this keeps the cycle of pain alive. Emotional dependency also distorts the perception of boundaries. You accept behaviors you would never have accepted before. You tolerate disrespect, manipulation, and indifference, all to maintain the bond. But the cost is high. You lose yourself. Recognizing dependency is not a reason for shame. It is a sign that you need care, support, and reconnection with yourself. Love should not mean surviving someone else. Healthy love does not create constant fear, does not condition your worth, and does not imprison you. It welcomes, strengthens, and allows you to be whole. When love turns into fear, there comes a quiet moment when something changes inside you. It is not an immediate breakup or a dramatic decision. It is a slow awakening. A realization that continuing this way is costing too much. You begin to wonder when you lost yourself and why loving started to hurt so deeply. This moment often comes with deep emotional exhaustion. You realize you have tried everything. You talked, waited, gave in, explained yourself, reshaped yourself, and still the insecurity remains. The fear continues. Then an unavoidable question arises. How long will you abandon yourself to keep this relationship? Choosing yourself does not mean you stop loving. It means you stop hurting yourself. It means recognizing that your feelings, boundaries, and needs matter. It is understanding that love should not require you to live in constant alert, nor walk on eggshells to maintain peace. In this process, guilt appears. Fear, too. You wonder if you are being unfair, cold, or selfish. But choosing yourself is not about hurting the other person. It is about protecting yourself. It is breaking free from the idea that you must suffer to deserve love. Little by little, you begin to rebuild your inner strength. You start listening to your intuition again. You notice signs you once ignored. You reclaim small parts of yourself that had been silenced. Every boundary set, every no spoken, is an act of courage. When love turns, Idfa, choosing yourself is a revolutionary act. It is not easy nor yorimid, bebirig. Because deep down, you understand that the love that most needs care is your own. And no relationship is worth the price of losing yourself. When love turns into fear, the greatest lesson that remains is this: real love does not create panic, does not paralyze, and does not require you to shrink to fit. Healthy love is calm. It does not need threats, control, or silence to exist. It lives in a space where you can breathe, be yourself, and feel safe. Love should not hurt every day. It should not cause constant anxiety or make you question your worth. Love that heals is not sustained by the fear of losing, but by the choice to stay. It respects boundaries, welcomes vulnerability, and does not turn mistakes into emotional punishment. After experiencing relationships where love became fear, relearning how to love is a process. It requires patience, self-compassion, and time. You may find peace unfamiliar. You may distrust silence that does not hurt, affection that does not demand, presence that does not threaten. But this is not emptiness. Sis peace, healthy love, does not require constant proof. It does not confuse intensity with suffering. It does not ask you to abandon yourself. On the contrary, it encourages your growth, strengthens your self-esteem, and respects your individuality. If you are listening to this and recognize yourself in every word, know this: you are not alone. Many people learned to confuse fear with love because that is what they were taught. But it is possible to break this pattern. It is possible to build relationships where love does not hurt, silence, or scare. When love stops being fear, it becomes home. A place where you do not need to protect yourself all the time, where your presence is enough. Where you do not need to disappear to be loved. That is the love you deserve. You always have. When love turns into fear, one of the greatest losses is trust in yourself. After doubting your own feelings for so long, silencing your intuition, and accepting what hurts, you begin to question everything you feel. It becomes hard to know what is exaggeration and what is a real warning. The inner voice that once felt clear now seems distant and confused. Relearning how to trust yourself is a delicate but essential process. It begins when you validate your emotions instead of denying them. When you understand that feeling fear, sadness, or discomfort is not weakness, but awareness. Your body and mind were always trying to protect you, even when you were unable to listen. This path requires patience. You may make mistakes, go back, feel longing, and question your decisions. All of this is part of healing. Healing is not about forgetting what happened, but about learning from the experience without blaming yourself. It is recognizing that you did the best you could with the emotional resources you had at the time. Trusting yourself also means rebuilding boundaries. Learning to say no without guilt. Learning to leave conversations that hurt. Learning to choose silence only when it protects you, not when it erases you. Every small conscious choice strengthens your emotional autonomy. Little by little, you begin to realize that you no longer need to convince yourself of anything. What hurts, hurts. What wounds, wounds. And that alone is enough to justify change. You do not need external validation to protect your peace. When love turns into fear, reconnecting with yourself is a return home.
No,
It is remembering that you always knew. You may have doubted. You may have waited too long, but your intuition never disappeared. And trusting it again is one of the most important steps toward building relationships where love does not create fear, but safety. When love turns into fear, life begins to shrink. You start living to avoid pain, conflict, and rejection. But true love does not ask you to hide, over-adapt, or hurt yourself in order to stay. Love should not be an emotional battlefield, but a space of safety and growth. It is important to remember that you do not need to be broken to deserve love. You do not need to prove your worth, endure suffering, or accept emotional crumbs. Healthy love does not demand constant endurance. It flows with respect, dialogue, and security. It does not place you against yourself. Maybe you are still in a relationship where loving hurts. Or maybe you have already left, but you carry deep scars. In both cases, know this: the fear you felt does not define who you are or what you deserve. It was a response to a painful experience, not a personal failure. Healing means allowing yourself to experience different kinds of relationships. It means recognizing warning signs earlier. It means trusting that you can leave when something hurts you. It means understanding that being alone for a while can be far healthier than staying where your soul shrinks. The love you deserve does not confuse you, threaten you, or silence you. It respects your boundaries, listens to your voice, and values your presence. You do not need to feel fear in order to love. You need to feel safe. If love became fear at some point in your life, let it become a lesson, not a sentence. You deserve a love that feels like shelter, not a storm. A love that adds, not consumes. A love where you can be whole, free, and at peace.